Mr. John, you can start now.
Okay, very good. Right, I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar when we're considering the impact of the crisis, the coronavirus basically, on young people and mental health from an educational point of view. Now, I think I should point out that, of course, this is an evolving process. This is the first time that we've experienced this on a global scale. So there are no real hard and fast answers. But what we hope to do in the next hour is to go through some of the ways in which we can address the issues that are arising from this current situation that we all find ourselves in. Catherine, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I think it's important, as you mentioned, to realise that this is a learning curve for everybody. Nobody has any completely set and correct answers, and so we are all learning as we go, as we are in life.
Right. What we will first of all look at is the objectives of this webinar, so that you have some idea of what we're going to be going through over the next hour or so. Now, if you do have questions or particular points you would like to clarify as we go through, then please do chip in. You can also use the chat box to ask, highlight the fact that you want to raise a question or ask a question. Okay, Catherine, would you like to go through the objective?
First, should we introduce ourselves?
Oh, yes, of course.
I'll go first to give you hi, I'm Catherine Mackenzie. I grew up in the UAE, actually. I lived there from the age of 5 or 6 to the age of 25. So I attended school in the UAE. I went to Sharjah English School in Sharjah, Jumeirah English Speaking School in Jumeirah, and then the English College on Sheikh Zayed Road, the grey and white building. And I also did my university degree in the UAE at Middlesex University, Dubai. And my main focus has been on psychology. I'm a health psychologist by trade, and at the moment I'm doing research. But I am also a teacher, and I've worked in the UAE and in the UK in schools as a teaching assistant, a one-to-one support assistant, working with students with additional needs, and also as a teacher. So this is how I'm approaching this topic. John?
Right, yeah, I spent the large part of the early part of my life in the military, the British Army, and the latter part I've spent mainly based in the Middle East, mainly based in Dubai, and doing all sorts of assignments for different organizations. HR kind of related. My specialist area is occupational and organizational psychology, which I've been practicing for about 30 years now. I've recently kind of semi-retired. I've set up my own consultancy company here in the UK, and I'm living in the north of Scotland. Right, shall we move on?
Yes, so as mentioned today, we're going to be talking to you about young people and mental health during times of crisis, and particularly during this time of crisis. So the webinar objective, we have a list of objectives. We want to consider and discuss appropriate actions regarding some issues, such as how to keep kids, and when we say kids, we mean adolescents as well as children, how to keep them active, fit and healthy during this period. Identifying which children or adolescents need help. Thinking about why talking is helpful, particularly right now and particularly for young people. Looking at how we can develop coping strategies as teachers, as educators, as parents. Thinking about mindfulness for children. Mindfulness is a huge buzzword at the moment for adults in positive psychology as well as children. creating a safe place in the web classroom, which is a particular difficulty that I find very interesting. The pros, cons, and safeguards around social media at the moment, and dealing with issues that are specific to coronavirus. So first of all, general tips for keeping kids active, fit, and healthy. So it's important here, I'm sure as teachers, you'll be familiar with modeling, how if you want students to learn and engage, you should model the behavior or the attitude that you want them to adopt. So it's particularly important at the moment to lead by example. Think about what the kids are hearing you say about the coronavirus, about issues to do with lockdown. And here in the UK, we're still in a full lockdown. And the way that you're talking about that will kind of read down into the kids. So the kids will begin to pick up the language that you're using around the coronavirus. Exercise is not a punishment. At times, I think, particularly in schools, we can tend to see exercise as a chore or something that needs to be done. But thinking about fun ways to be active in a smaller space, I think, John, you had some ideas about that.
Oh, yeah. The exercise, by exercise, we don't necessarily mean physical or, strict physical exercise. What we are talking about is engaging children in all sorts of activities. For example, there are all sorts of games that you can use to help exercise. There are many websites that are now having exercises, physical exercises, with people demonstrating particular actions that you can follow online. And I think the important point here is to make is that that encouraging kids to exercise is not something that should be seen as as unpleasant for them. So what you need to do is to look at ways and things that they like doing that are active, and try to encourage those sort of actions.
And particularly perhaps those kinds of games that can be done in a smaller area. So for example, if
جماعة
I'm sorry, we couldn't really.
Sorry for the disturbance. I have muted everyone. You can start. You can start again. Sorry.
Okay, sure.
We're really sorry, Mr. John. Maybe accidentally someone kept the mute. So they maybe they wanted to talk or something. So we've muted everyone right now, and please complete. We will be like organizing it for you. Sorry for that. Please complete.
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you.
The kind of exercises that you can engage in with children are typically things like yoga, for example. Many kids probably, I mean, we normally think of yoga as an exercise regime for adults. However, what you can do in a small space in a confined home or I mean, to do yoga, you don't need much space at all. And very simple moves can greatly help to, keep children active. And you can make it fun as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point, and it's about keeping the kids busy and keeping that sense of achievement and being active going throughout a lockdown. On the same page, sports are not for everyone. There are some children and adolescents who will not enjoy the sports, and for keeping them fit and active and healthy, I think it's a good thing to think about activities that they actually enjoy doing and try and create some exercise, create games around that. For younger children, you can create hide and seek games where, for example, if they have a particular drawing, they love drawing, for example, you could put the pens, different colored pens in different parts of the room and say, okay, well, you've got to, before you can color this in red, you've got to go and find the red pen. And so there are very unique ways to keep healthy, even if sports is not their preferred choice. Exploration and ownership. In the same vein, it is important for children to have a sense of ownership over their own time. Something like a lockdown journal might be useful. This would be something that they create themselves. They set the rules. So as a teacher, you just say it needs to be a book, and they can really go with how they want. Recognizing that everyone is experiencing difficulties during these times, and we'll touch on that again later. Making chores fun. I was a primary school teacher, so I worked with young children, specifically those between the ages of 5 and 11, and especially younger children really enjoyed creating songs about chores. We had the tidying up the classroom song, and we had the doing the dishes song. We had lots of different songs, and doing things like that can really make those everyday things that you'll be doing even more now, can make them fun.
Yeah, I think
limited screen time.
Mr. John,
yeah.
I need an explanation on the point where you were talking about like exercising, doing like some activities for the kids. Actually, I'm here at home and I'm a mother of 3. It's been a bit difficult because like in the beginning they were like enjoying the videos through YouTube. In the UAE here we're having like great activities through an application to connect them with their teachers, their students. They're doing like physical education online. They're doing amazing artwork. They're doing their music classes also online. But my son was like, he's around 8 years old, and he was telling me, I'm sick of this. It's been too long. I cannot face the computer. It's uncomfortable. I need to see my friends. I need to be around them. It's becoming like something boring for him to just do it at home, and like no one is actually seeing what he's doing. He's that personality where he likes the attention, and he likes to just like pop up and talk a lot and do like activities where like people can like give comments. I don't think it's enough only from me and like his father giving the points, and like I don't know, what's your point of view? It's been too long for them. I think they're like fed up of the situation.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. But one of the things that have you thought about, or have you tried setting up a network with his friends? So you know, that perhaps they can at certain times of the day that you agree with them, get on line a bit like we are doing now, and just talk to each other and perhaps do some activities together. Okay, I know it's not ideal, it's not face to face, but at least contact with friends is very important. And I think that we all need to try to find ways of actually encouraging this, and to use to use systems like Zoom, WebEx, Skype, Teams, MS Teams. These are great facilities for kids to keep in contact with their friends. I think it's a very important point.
And I think as well, it can be helpful to, as an adult, don't tell them what to do with their time. Say I've set up this Skype call between you and your friends and agree with all the other parents. You can say, well, let's talk at a certain time of the day, and then just let them go with it. Let them do what they want. Say, what do you guys want to do? And they can play games online. They can all play together. They could do things like draw each other pictures. They could play games where they, I've seen one group of children playing a game where they hide something off the camera and then people have to guess what it is. And they're saying, oh, well, it feels like, it feels round. That works for younger children as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's keeping in contact with their friends is exceptionally important. Another important point is that what we should not do is just dictate everything to children. What to do to get their cooperation, to get them involved, what we have to do is to involve them from the start. So, for example, sit down and get them to agree or get them to suggest to you the whole time of activities that you go through during. Let them take ownership of it. Now, I understand that for young children this is difficult, but at least they will feel that they're, you know, being part of the, you know, the decision-making process as to what they do with their time.
Yeah. And one thing, I don't know how many, oh, sorry. Is there someone with a question? I was just going to say that I think one thing, I don't know how many teachers that are listening, but if you have a classroom contract, which some teachers at the beginning of the year, they say, these are the rules for our classroom. For example, everyone is kind to each other, everyone has this. You could have your own contract and make it with them and say, well, what are our rules? What are we going to do for each other during this time? And that can help as well. Okay. So limiting screen time, there's a lot of news at the moment. I mean, if you look at Twitter, Instagram, all of the social media channels, there's always news about coronavirus everywhere. And for adults as well as children, it can be very healthy to take a break from that, take a step back. For example, I have half an hour every morning and that's all the news I'm allowed to look at. And that's all my social media for the day as well, because otherwise it's very easy to get overloaded and feel overwhelmed with the amount of information and misinformation as well that's out there about coronavirus.
Yeah, I think I would like to add too, just on that point of limiting screen time, that there are games that you can introduce that are nothing to do with screen. So what I'm talking about here are for younger kids, like games like marbles that you can take part in as well as an adult. Ludo, snakes and ladders, and then for older children, Scrabble, or even younger children for that matter, Scrabble, Monopoly for older children. You know, these are all games which have some educational element to them, but will help it to engage them without having to resort to looking at a screen. You know, we all need a break from the screen.
Definitely. So moving on, one of the key difficulties I feel in this period, especially if you're a teacher with a classroom of children, well, web classroom, will be identifying those who need help. How do you know? Well, with younger children, it can be a lot of unusual behavior, anger or sadness, things like wetting the bed, physical symptoms, such as if they get a stomachache or headache, or they can't, with younger children, they find it more difficult to articulate, to tell you how they're feeling. So quite often it will be, I don't feel good, or my head hurts, or my stomach hurts. And sometimes just asking the question, you know, how are you, as well as what's wrong with your stomach, can help. Inability to control bowel movements, so wetting the bed or wetting their underwear can also occur if they're lethargic, which is when they're extremely tired and they don't want to do anything, and having really bad reactions to change in any form, such as a timetable change. And we'll come back to that later. Older children, the key point I want to make here is that they might display unusual anger or irritation towards their friends or authority figures who they get along with. Particularly friends, if you notice that they're not treating their friends in the same way as they have been before, if they're all getting irritated, that might be a sign that you just need to stop and ask a question. Most of all, it's anything that's out of the ordinary. If you're a parent, then obviously you will know your children well. If you're a carer, you will know the children well. And as well as a teacher, look out for anything that's out of the ordinary in your class or children. Are there any questions? Okay. So children may be asking for help if they are spending too much time alone. They, again, approach someone who feels safe to them. So a teacher, a teaching assistant, or a parent, a friend with an unrelated issue. They might say, oh, you know, I really don't feel well. They might see it as something physical. They may refuse to do work or engage in the lesson, responding in an unusual way to work or homework, not acting as usual with their friends or avoiding their friends, or appear to be feeling lonely. And yes, this is just to illustrate the key point there. Anyone who appears to be lonely is not talking to their friends as they normally would. So talking can be very helpful.
Catherine,
Yes. Yeah.
can I please interrupt?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to just, can you give me a bit more details on that kind of personality?
On the, if you think that they may be spending too much time alone.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
maybe alone, but like not interacting through the sessions, not talking a lot, closing the cameras, to like learn, you know, that kind of personality. We have a lot of from this kind of people nowadays, like since like the past month, we've been through that issue. So if you could like just talk a bit of more details, if you can give us, and how to talk to them and how to treat this group of people.
The first thing I would say for this group of people is to let them spend some time in the web classroom, if you're a teacher, a web classroom, without having a lesson or without being taught. Just give them something fun to do. Say, okay, spend an hour playing games with each other, just to get them associating it with something a bit more positive. Let them have, to try and encourage them to have a positive experience just in that space, in the web classroom. Maybe play a game, ask them what they want to do. Say, do you want to all watch a movie together? Do you want to all watch a YouTube video together? And just try to get them to see something positive there. And then slowly, if you keep having those positive moments, they will begin to see it as more positive, and they should then begin to pay a bit more attention. But yeah, doing something together with their friends. Sorry, John.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that the key word here is engagement. Now, the signs that you were describing are all indications of the child, perhaps subconsciously, just rejecting or rebelling against what they feel they're being told to do. That in their minds is, you know, is just something that's not quite fair, and you know, as they see it. So what you have to try to do is, rather than resorting, as it's all too easy to do, telling them that they have to do this or to do that, you have to try to engage them. And one way to do this is to ask them how they're feeling. You know, what do they think about things? What is it that's worrying them? You know, in this way, you can hopefully get them engaging with you in a you know, kind of sensible interaction. Does that help?
Yes, it's very clear. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay. So it's, as John was just talking to me about, talking can be very helpful. We all need contact comfort, and contact doesn't just mean physical, giving a hug or something like that. Contact is also just talking, just having a conversation, especially for adolescents, older children, with their friends and with their peers. So I think it's very useful. Some parents that I know, for example, have set up groups for their on Zoom or WebEx or Skype for their adolescent children to talk and just have some time together. And the adults don't interfere at all. They just say, this is your group. Okay, go off and chat, have fun, play games. Talking to people they trust may help them figure out what's going on in your head. And it's important, especially for younger children, again, to recognize that while others may appear to be always happy and coping well with the situation, it's unlikely to be true all the time, even though they might say, oh, well, so-and-so is able to do, why can so-and-so do this all the time and I can't? It's recognizing that that won't be true all the time for everybody. And we know through lots of research that talking about anxiety and depression helps. And so we can infer from that that it will also help with distress. And you can share resources, talking to other teachers, for example, if you're a teacher, or talking to other parents, find out what's working and what's not working for different people. And then you can learn more about what to do yourself. Children will talk to someone they know well, who they trust, someone who's easy to talk to, who's kind, who's a good listener, and who can empathize. And I think that cartoon illustrates it quite well. We don't want to be like the lady in the picture who is not listening to the child on the bench.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile emphasizing this point that we, even as adults, we especially during periods of lockdown when we're perhaps separated and so on, it's so essential that we keep in touch. And of course, we're blessed these days with the, all these different ways in which we can communicate through using social media tools.
Mm. Yes, definitely. And I think it's just, again, that power of just giving the children a space where they can communicate with their peers as well.
Mm. Yeah.
So if you're a teacher, you may not have this opportunity. If you're a parent, you may not have this opportunity. But if you can, it might be good to plan having a chat with a particular, for example, student that you've identified, okay, they might be struggling a little bit, let me talk to them. If you can't, then I know it can be very manic if you have children, or if you're in a classroom, it can feel like there isn't time to plan. If you can, choose a good time that you know is a good time for the student. If you know, or your child, if you know that they don't like the period after lunchtime because they tend to feel a bit sleepy, then avoid that time. Choose somewhere quiet. If you're a teacher, this might mean for you to go and take your computer to talk to them in a different room, somewhere where if you have children, they're not going to be interrupting, or if you have pets, they won't be interrupting. Ask a very general question, leave it open to them to give you any specific information. Don't jump in with your thoughts about how they are coming across. Let them set the tone for the conversation. Offer some support and advice, but I think it's very important, especially for teachers, to be clear about what you can and can't do to help. You can't, for example, as a teacher, really tell a parent that so-and-so's brother is annoying them. That isn't something that you can do. You go back to the child and say, well, I think you need to talk to your parents about this.
We have a question, Catherine.
Oh.
One question that I'm seeing here in the chat box is, how can resilience affect on children's well-being? I think that this is it's a little bit difficult to answer this. But what I would emphasize here is the important role that adults set as models of examples. So if you take the right attitude to this crisis, if you can emphasize that, if you discuss it freely, talk about worries, but then you can emphasize that, look, this is what we can do about it, and we're going to get through it. I think that's I don't know if I've really answered the question, but resilience is important, and it's important that we all show resilience in front of our children.
Definitely, and I think that can be admitting to them that you have worries and concerns, but then talking to them about how you cope with your worries and concerns. And yes, but resilience is incredibly important, and I think it needs to be a long-term project. Resilience, it's not going to happen over an hour. It needs a long time and repeated positive experiences. Again, it's like I was saying about the if someone's not engaging in lessons, to build up that resilience, you need to get them to have one positive experience in the classroom and then build that up and say, okay, well, let's repeat that. Let's try and have another positive experience. Then over time, that resilience will build up and they'll find it a bit easier. Okay. Are there any other questions in there, John?
No, not that I can see.
Okay. So I focused this section primarily on teachers. I'm not entirely sure how many teachers we have in the audience, but this is primarily for teachers, but will be relevant for parents as well. So I think at the moment, it's important that we acknowledge in front of children that this is an unusual time for everyone. And you could talk to them about why this might be difficult for different groups of people. For example, why healthcare workers might be struggling right now, or why airline staff might be struggling right now. And just acknowledge that everybody is coping with these barriers and that we are working together, or we're trying to work together to overcome them. If you're a teacher, really try to keep your usual classroom atmosphere. Use the same language, adopt similar behavior management techniques as far as you can, sanctions and benefits such as house points, if you use them, and try to retain as much as you can, and this is for parents as well as students, really try to keep the children's link to the school through mention of other teachers, other classes, other students that they know, places in the school, even physical places. You could talk to them about what you're going to do in the classroom when you get back to a classroom. Really keep that link going, because that sense of community will, again, aid that resilience, and it will aid their well-being to feel that sense of community. And model a thoughtful response to the current situation. Again, it's about modeling that resilience, accepting that this situation is difficult, it is unusual, but we are all trying to work through it, and we can do things to help. And what, as teachers or as parents, what are you doing to help? I think that's a key point.
Catherine, a question.
Okay.
This question is from Safa. How to connect or understand a child with optional silence rather than drawing? I'm not quite sure what you mean, Safa, by optional silence.
Do you mean contemplation and just, rather than drawing, having a silent time that's based around thinking and thought?
I think this is bordering on the mindfulness, isn't it, Catherine?
Yes, that's what I was thinking. If it is that.
We're going to talk about mindfulness in a minute. Yeah.
Okay. Mindfulness for children. So mindfulness is incredibly useful for adults. And again, I would encourage all adults, as parents, as teachers, as teaching assistants, and basically anybody, to find some mindfulness resources. If you're a teacher, it might be useful to reserve some time during the school day for quiet contemplation, and you can still do this within the web classroom. Still during the school day, just say, we're going to take 10 minutes. This is our reflective time. This is our quiet time. This is the time where we thank perhaps everybody for the work that they're doing. And this is the time that we just think for ourselves and just have a few moments of quiet. There are apps such as Calm and Headscape, which should both be available in the UAE. I know Calm is available in the UAE. If older students have their own phones, you can direct them to those apps, and they are very good. They give you breathing exercises, which might be useful again. And can also be very beneficial around sleep routines and encouraging people to sleep well. Especially for younger children, as I mentioned before, it can be very difficult for them to know how they feel. And so drawing pictures, expressing themselves in any way, a lockdown journal or scrapbook that they set the rules for might be really helpful in this vein. And then you could, if you're a teacher, for example, you could build it up into, oh, well, we'll all share our journals when we get back to school. We'll have a show and tell, and we'll show everybody our lockdown scrapbook. PSHE, which is physical, social, and health education in the UK. Lessons on identifying and responding to emotions might be useful. There are some very good resources on the TES website, which is again available in the UAE. And Headscape is a mental health website for young people. And that is something that I've only just recently come across, actually, but I believe it's aimed more at adolescents, and it just gives them a space where I think it's quite open for what they do on it, but it just is centered around mindfulness and giving them a space to be creative and have some contemplation. And that I've got some more resources and some games at the end of the presentation as well. So this was a very difficult question to think about. How do you create a safe place in the web classroom? For some children, or in the house, for some children, the school day can be really difficult, and I think it can be really difficult in the web classroom, in the web school day as well. So creating a safe place will still be important. I think it's having a set time again to have that meditation, mindfulness time, to talk about mental health and well-being. And you can model that by saying, well, I felt quite nervous, or, you know, you can really model that by talking yourself. Now, this one, you might have to talk to parents, or if you're a parent, you might have to talk to a teacher about how their home workspace can be as comfortable for them to be working as possible. Because I
would just like to add there that if possible, it's good to give them their own private place, you know, that's
definitely
dedicated for them to actually work at. So they can keep their things there, and it becomes their own sort of territory.
Yeah, and they could even do a bit of decorating. I mean, this is where the parents will come in, as much as the parents are comfortable with, do a bit of decorating, like draw some pictures for their workspace. And especially for the younger or early adolescents who are struggling to engage with lessons online, creating that space where they go might actually be helpful as well. If they can design it, they can draw pictures, they can print out pictures and design the space themselves. So if you're a teacher, you might have a class contract that you make with your class students at the beginning of every year. And this is just normally an agreement that you make with the class about what your class rules are going to be. For example, one that I am a big fan of is I will be kind to everybody in this classroom, and then everybody signs the class contract. And that could be useful to have in the web classroom as well. So you could start by saying, okay, well, what's our rules going to be for today then? Allowing students time for social break times where possible, even in the web classroom. Again, it's getting that contact, sustained contact with their peers, which might be really, really helpful. And that might help with engagement as well. Liaising with parents on any changes that are happening at home due to the situation, that might obviously have an impact on how the children are behaving in the classroom. And never forget reading and drawing.
Yeah, I would like to add here, when we're talking about parents, I'm not sure what the situation is in the UAE, but we have some families that are basically split up at the moment due to social distancing. So, for example, healthcare workers, many of them are living in hotels or separately from the rest of the family. So, of course, this brings its own pressures. It means that the lone parent looking after the child has, a huge task. It can be very stressful with children at home all day, and trying to keep the house going and everything.
I think that's where, again, John, as you mentioned right at the beginning, having a routine can really help.
Yeah, and I keep on emphasizing this, but I think it's so important to engage the children. Engagement is the key word here. Engage the children in creating this routine. Let them take part in the decision making of what they do and when they do it.
Absolutely. So, John, I think you were going to take the lead on this section.
Yep.
Talking about social media.
Yeah, social media is so important. Okay, if you can, what we need to look at is what kind do they have? And what we're talking about here is the applications that they have, what kind of feed you have. By feed, I mean all the messages that you get. I know, for example, I use mainly emails, although I use WhatsApp and other social media tools as well. But I know that I'm probably like many other people. I spend perhaps 20 minutes every day just deleting all the emails that I don't really want. I never quite seem to get round to deleting them or unsubscribing from them. But if the more that we use social media, the more important it is that we make sure that what we're being fed is clean. In other words, it leaves us with that positive feeling. It's something that we want, that we find useful, and it's not something that leaves us with a negative feeling. We need to find the right crowd too. We need to follow people that believe in the same kind of causes that we do, that are interested in the same things that we do, that that give us a positive feeling. What we need to do is we need to train our youngsters that there are all sorts of techniques which we'll come on to about how you can actually control this. By identifying and avoiding unhealthy communities, especially in times like this when we're all concerned about our health, we can look at lots of websites and groups, communities, online communities, who will spread news about coronavirus, and a lot of it might not be true. The tips and advice that you get. So, or indeed, it might not be given by experts. So we have to become very perhaps more conscious now than ever of eliminating those communities that are not healthy for us.
Could I jump in there, John?
Yeah.
I was going to say, one, if you're a teacher, then it might be really good to have an exercise with the adolescents or slightly younger children about how do you tell what is misinformation and what is true information. That might be a very useful source, especially now when there's lots of information on social media, and as you said, not all of it will be true. And it might be very distressing for people who can't tell the difference or who don't have the resources to be able to make that distinction. So supporting the youngsters to make that distinction and to be able to see what's fake news might be really helpful for them.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. Talking to a trusted person about online experiences, I think, is very important. Now, by trusted person, this might not be the parent or the teacher, just, excuse me, just somebody that is close to the child, who is trusted by that child, that they feel that they can share these experiences with.
And perhaps somebody as well, I always would say that it's very useful for parents and teachers to be familiar with social media themselves, because if your children are looking at something, then you will be able to say, okay, well, this is how you block someone, or this is how you mute someone.
Yep, okay. Shall we move on?
Yep. Yes, if you're a teacher or a parent, it would be good to know who the school safeguarding officer is. All schools will have a safeguarding officer. It's someone who's responsible for the safety online and physical safety of the children, of the students.
Right, I think this is a very important topic. I'm not sure about the UAE, but it's quite prevalent here in the UK, especially with teenagers. You know, we're talking here about online bullying, and it's important that we encourage children to talk to a trusted person. And the trusted person could be the school safeguarding officer, a teacher, teaching assistant, you know, obviously a parent as well, perhaps. And it's important that we block or report people who engage in online bullying.
I think at the moment it's particularly prevalent with the coronavirus. Certain groups of populations are being targeted on social media with comments saying, oh, you are from this country, therefore you started this, and really being bullied like that.
Yep, and a key thing here is that you can learn how to mute them if you don't want to block them. The issue with blocking people is that then they will know that you've blocked them, and they may look at other ways of getting at you. Where if you know how to mute them, that means that they won't know. It just means that you're not getting what they're sending. And then learning how to use the privacy settings to limit what people can see, you know, on WhatsApp and Instagram and all these other tools. They all have privacy settings, and you know, they can limit what people can actually see.
And I think all of this as well should also relate to online negativity or online negative experiences. For example, if an adolescent or a parent or a teacher is having a negative experience with a certain section of a website, then they can turn that section off, mute them. It depends on the website. A lot of them, some of them you can block and they still won't know that you've blocked them. For example, Facebook doesn't tell people if you've unfriended them. However, you can also mute them, and that can work from news sources as well. So, for example, I have unsubscribed from a number of email chains that I didn't find particularly positive at this point in time, because they were talking in a very negative way, and I thought it would be healthier to be without that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. I mean, our interactions on social media should be positive, not negative. I mean, these affect our mood. Yeah, and it's very important, especially with teenagers, to get them to recognize that what they put online stays there.
And this is a very stressful time, and imagine a lot of youngsters nowadays, especially adolescents, will have grown up with social media, expressing themselves on social media, and it's important to look at what they're putting online during this time of extreme stress for a lot of people, and to kind of watch that and make sure they're coping with it positively online, because sometimes we just need a reminder that, okay, it's okay to discuss how you're feeling on, for example, Facebook, but you know, that will stay there forever. So let's just make sure that it's something that you are comfortable with being out there.
Okay. Shall we move on?
Yeah. Okay. So caring for others on social media is a positive way of engaging, keeping in frequent contact with friends, especially at the moment, especially during a lockdown, finding a cause you believe in and supporting it, really getting something positive out of these experiences. You can check your mood. Does a news site or does a social media website, does it tend to make you feel better or worse when you come away? And really emphasize this with your children as well. Say, well, how do you feel now that you've just spent an hour looking at Instagram? Do you feel better or worse? And why do you think you feel better or worse? And definitely thinking before you speak or text is always a good motto to follow.
Catherine, we have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
One from Winwa, which says, now this is relating to the information that we get, going back to the point about the communities.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're saying is that the problem is that we're not sure if what we're receiving is true or not, but sometimes share to check if it's true. That's why I'm checking now trusted websites before sharing. Well, I think that's a very good point.
Yes.
But what we need to do is we need to look at different sources for checking our facts. You know, the way to do that is, you know, it's quite right that what you need to do is to look at trusted websites before you share anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we should be teaching our children.
Yeah.
We've got another question here.
Mm-hmm.
Blocking is a sheer rejection, which might have negative impacts. Yes, I totally agree. That's why I mentioned the point about muting, because that way the person that you're trying to block will not know that you've blocked them, but you won't get their messages.
And you can also turn off notifications for certain people on Instagram and Facebook, especially on the apps on the phone. So you could turn off notifications from a certain person or people, then you won't get a notification when they've posted something.
Yeah. Okay, getting enough good sleep. This is very important. Lack of good sleep affects your mood. Well, yeah, I think this is pretty obvious. One of the problems is that now that we're using social media such a lot, it's very easy to slip into the habit of, you know, checking your phone last thing at night. And then you spend 3/4 of an hour or half an hour just looking at your phone, and then you try to go to sleep. Now, there's been all sorts of research by eminent psychologists to say that this is not a good thing to do. And there are certain techniques that you can adopt to get around this. Of course, what you can use is use night settings. I mean, I have an iPhone here, and I have night settings set on it. It even tells me when I should be going to bed, and then it switches off all notifications from the time that I've set between when I go to bed and wake up in the morning. Avoiding reading books on the phone late at night. Why not just use a paperback? Yeah, like the boy in the diagram. Using the computer and the phone on nightlight settings, which takes away some of the brightness, and you can put it on a kind of night setting. And also something that I've discovered recently, which is very useful, is the use of audiobooks for relaxation.
I'd also add podcasts to audiobooks, and there are some great podcasts aimed for adolescents and for young children as well. And they can be really useful, especially for that period of time before you're going to sleep, because all of these things will impact how your students or your children are interacting throughout the day and how they're engaging with what they're doing throughout the day.
Well, we also have another question here. It's a comment, actually. But I see muting, bullying people or blocking them is not an effective action. I think we need stronger action to stop bullying. Absolutely.
Yes.
And this is why it's so important that we report bullying. Because, you know, we can take all these precautions against bullying, these steps to avoid it online. But of course, it has to be reported. I mean, what we need to do is convince the person who's doing the bullying that what they're doing is actually bullying and it's not acceptable social behavior.
I think that comes with parents and teachers as well, engaging in helpful and positive social media behaviors, modeling that for the adolescents. I've seen a lot of parents, a lot of teachers who don't use social media then say to their children, this isn't helpful, why are you doing this? And it can be more helpful to engage in social media yourself, and so that you can try and filter down, then model the behaviors that you want to see in your children with them. And one of those things can be blocking people, because the reality is if these people are blocked, then it's a step. It's not meant to be a big solution, but it's one step.
Yeah, we have a comment too regarding telephones. I have no disturb mode during night or sleeping time. Might I suggest that you just switch the phone off at night time? I mean, why do we need to keep it switched on? You know, yeah, I think, yeah. Okay. Somebody has pointed out that, yeah, convincing them that bullying is a crime. Yeah, agree.
Which again should be coming from all angles, and I think it's working with them and engaging in social media yourself to show them what bullying is can really be helpful, and especially from a teaching standpoint.
And somebody has mentioned that one way of dealing with the phone, if you don't have the facilities for muting it during sleeping time, is that you could put it on flight mode. Well, yeah, that sounds like something you could do. Agree?
Definitely. Okay, John, you had one more point there about regular sleeping habits.
Yes. Go to bed and wake up at the same times daily. And I think this is especially important for children. One of the things that's upsetting in a time of crisis is that, generally speaking, they're used to the routine of going to bed at the same time on school nights, at least, waking up at the same time, getting ready for school in the same kind of time scale, being in school at a certain time, changing classes at certain times, having a break at certain times, and then going home at certain times. This is all a routine that they've become comfortable with. So in these days of lockdown, having a regular routine for children is so very, very important. But what I would urge is that you get their cooperation in setting that routine. Okay, so now we're locked down at home. We've got a bit more flexibility, but let's sit down and work out a sensible daily routine and get them to contribute to it and agree between you the daily schedule and stick to it.
Yeah, and again, modelling comes in there as well. Have a routine for the adults as well as for the children. So have a routine, have a plan as parents as well. So a little bit about coronavirus. Again, we think it's important that you know the facts. Recognising fake news can be particularly important for adolescents who are engaging with social media. Rationing the news that you look at might be a very good idea, particularly, again, for adolescents. And doing things that help you and your children feel calm. Again, this can be mindfulness, this can be engaging in the positive behaviors, the positive parts of social media, and muting, ignoring, blocking the rest. Coping with self-isolation is inevitably difficult for all of us, for parents and teachers, adults as well as children. And I think it's being aware of the difficulties that everybody's experiencing and the universal nature of this that we can find our strength in. Again, acknowledging that more than ever, children need that contact comfort. And again, contact doesn't have to mean physical contact. Contact can be talking to their friends. I really strongly encourage parents to have a web platform where their children of any age can just talk to their friends and just let them take ownership of that time and say, okay, you have an hour with your friends, do what you do with your friends. And you could give them games, they could all watch a movie together, but that shared comfort will be. PPE, especially face masks, can be frightening for younger children. One exercise that I've seen a teacher do here in the UK is to get students to design their own face masks. So to have colourful designs for all the face masks to make them a bit less frightening. Computer games or apps that families or groups can play together that are educational and fun. I found a few. These are all available in the UAE. They should be. One is Draw Something, which is one person starts drawing and the other person has to guess what the first person is drawing as they're drawing. Worms. Quiz Up is brilliant. I play it with my nephew, who's an adolescent in the UAE. And you can have quizzes about anything. There are quizzes about geography, there are quizzes about biology, there are quizzes about Harry Potter, there are quizzes about all sorts of things, and you can all play together. So this, I think, is also relating to parents believing in yourself and what the difficulties have been over this coronavirus situation. So we talk a lot in the teaching profession about reflection, the importance of reflecting. And one thing that might be useful to do is to write down any negative beliefs you have about your web-based teaching or your parenting during this crisis. Think about when they started. Is there a particular lesson that you find really, really difficult to do online? And search for resources to help. This can be talking to other teachers, other parents, say, what are you doing about this? And take things one step at a time. Accept that no one is going to be a perfect parent during the lockdown. No one is going to be a perfect teacher during the lockdown. That everything needs to be taken one step at a time. But then challenge the negative feelings and say, well, how else can I view this? I could also view this as I'm growing as a teacher or a parent. I'm learning new techniques. I'm learning new things. And what advice would you give to a colleague or peer with the same beliefs? Are there any positives that you have about your web-based teaching or parenting during this time? Have there been any successes, big or small? Have you managed to engage one of your students who you had difficulty engaging in the physical classroom? Or did you manage to get a class discussion going in a thoughtful way online? Is there anything that has surprised you in a positive way about teaching via distance? And have you learned anything that you want to adopt in classroom-based teaching? I think the key point that I'm trying to make here is to remember that we are all in this together, and there will be no one parent or no one teacher will have all the answers at the moment. We're all learning as we go along. And in that way, we're all together, we're all universal. And I think that is the key thing that we want to show our children and our students as well, that they are all in it together and they're in it with us, and we're all facing an uncertain time.
Yeah. And these are the references.
Yes, there are a series of references here. They should all be open to you in the UAE. If they're not, then let me know and I'll find an alternative, because I'm sure there are alternatives. I want to particularly point out the Big White Wall, which is down here. It's a resource specifically designed for adolescents, and in the UK, most universities actually let their students onto the Big White Wall for free. And it's designed around encouraging mindfulness and reflection in adolescence. And it's a brilliant resource, and I strongly recommend it.
Yeah, we have a few comments actually, Catherine.
Okay.
Manu is saying that computer games and quizzes play a key role in this time. We are providing a typing game so that they can improve typing skills. Yes.
I love those games.
I agree. Now is the time when we can try all sorts of things that we've been maybe desiring to do. Believe it or not, I'm starting to learn to play the piano at my ripe old age. Not very successfully so far, but I've got plenty of time to pursue it.
Well, I can help you with that.
We've got a comment from somebody whose name is in Arabic. My son was feeling happy in the first 2 weeks, and after that he began to feel bored and lethargic and became angry and crying to draw attention. I set a special schedule for him for fun and devoted time to stories and time for sports and a time to play with Mama as he chooses to manipulate. And I took his bike for me, and we started racing with bikes daily and set aside time for a park. The house has grown in a range. Yeah, I mean, I think this is what we need to do. This is very good. That you need to engage with children. Engagement is the key word here. So get them to come up with a program that they will do, that they will join in daily, of things that they want to do. If it's partly their idea, then that's what they should be happy doing.
I agree.
And keep activities to 20 minutes or less, especially younger children will get bored if you're engaging in activities that take longer than 20 minutes.
Yes, definitely. I mean, when I was teaching in primary school, we had a maths lesson that was 45 minutes. And because a large portion of that class found it quite difficult to engage with maths lessons, we used to divide the lesson into 2 20-minute chunks. And then we'd have a little, we called it the fun run in the middle, where we'd run around the outside playground. But in this instance, obviously more difficult, but you could have a quick walk around the house or a quick dance, 10-minute dance, to just have a break.
We've got another question here from Mohammed about requesting some tips to nurture a positive self-view for children. I think here, this depends very much on the relationship between the parents, teachers, and the child. What I would say here is that the more that you engage on a one-to-one basis with a child and address their worries. Children typically, especially younger children, don't know how to express their worries. They will tend to keep it to themselves, or they may well keep it to themselves. However, they may well open up if you ask them. Just sit down with them and introduce gently. I mean, I'm not suggesting, as I think Catherine mentioned right at the beginning, that you immediately say, "Oh, what's worrying you?" You have to lead them into the conversation gradually, talking about something else, and then gradually, once they've got the confidence in you, and maybe the conversation's been going for a few minutes, and then you start to get round to finding out, asking questions about what might be concerning them.
And also, I just want to point out there, modeling as well, especially when we're talking about, somebody mentioned resilience, talking about well-being. These are things that take time. They're not just going to be one experience that solves things. So really modeling positive self-worth, modeling making mistakes, and letting mistakes are okay, and letting them know that mistakes are okay. We learn from mistakes. When I was teaching, I would actually quite often slip in a little mistake into my spelling sometimes, just to show the class that I was comfortable with making a mistake myself. And then I would say, "Oh, you're right. Oh, okay, I'll cross that out. I'll do it again. It's fine." Because quite often it's those little things that can really build up and negatively impact self-worth.
Yeah. We have a question from Manu about the computer. Oh no, I think we've we've done that one. We can't put games online, Catherine.
Pardon?
You know, the games that you mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, these here. Can we put these links?
We can definitely, and I'm sure these are all apps and they should be available on iPhone and Android.
Okay. That really brings us to just about the end of the webinar. Any final questions or points? Okay.
Brilliant.
Well, what I would like to do is to personally wish you all the best. It's a difficult time that we're going through. And Ramadan, you're going through Ramadan as well, which for young children can sometimes be a little bit difficult. We hope that we've given you some useful points to think about here, and yeah, we've greatly enjoyed delivering this session.
Yes, it was very helpful for me as well.
And thank you for the questions.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Right. I think what we do now is we need to say goodbye, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. John. Thank you, Dr. Christine, for your very interesting session that we got today. It's a lot of good information, interesting information that we got from you guys. And thank you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, thank
Wish
you.
you the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad.
Thank you.
Okay.